Get up or get out. You're banned from flying. The captain's voice wasn't raised, it was carved, each word like a blade slicing through the cabin. Passengers froze mid-breath. A flight attendant's smile vanished into stone, and in seat 3 amperes, the black woman in a navy suit did not flinch. The man standing beside the captain, a white passenger with a polo tucked tight over his belly, jabbed a finger toward her seat as if he were staking a claim. "That's mine," he barked. His tone wasn't a request, it was a decree. Cameras tilted. 1 row back, a young woman angled her phone, the red dot of recording glowing faint like an ember. The cabin, moments earlier filled with the soft hum of engines and clink of glasses, now carried only tension, tight, sharp, electric. The captain leaned closer. "This is your final warning. Vacate the seat." But she sat still, hands folded lightly on the tray, posture steady as if the aircraft itself balanced on her composure. Passengers exchanged looks. Some muttered, others stared. One man whispered, "What's happening?" But no one answered, because everyone knew what they were watching. It wasn't about a boarding pass. It was about belonging. Her eyes moved slowly from the captain's hand, stiff, hovering over her armrest to the man beside him, his face flushed with entitlement, then to the phone lens catching every second. Her silence wasn't empty. It was heavier than his shouting. "Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change. And we're glad you're here." Now, back to her. She had flown 1,000 miles without turbulence. Yet here, before the wheels even left the ground, came the storm. And the storm had a voice in uniform. The man in the polo laughed under his breath. "Figures. Always sneaking into places you don't belong." The words landed like spit. A ripple moved through the cabin. Someone gasped. Someone else shook their head. The air wasn't pressurized anymore. It was poisoned. The captain's jaw tightened. His badge gleamed beneath the cabin light, but the authority in his stance was borrowed, fragile, ready to crack. He gestured toward the aisle, to the uniformed officer waiting just outside the curtain. "Escort her," he ordered. Still, she didn't move. No panic, no plea. Only the calm of someone who had been told you don't belong more times than she could count. And each time, she remembered. 16, in a hotel lobby. 25, at a real estate office. 32, in another airport lounge. Different rooms, same sentence, but never once had it broken her. The phone in row 4 trembled as the young woman whispered, "They're really doing this." Her voice, though soft, traveled, a spark in the silence. And in that moment, seat 3 amperes wasn't just a chair on a plane. It was a battleground. Her name, at least on the ticket, was Amara Lewis, 42. No entourage, no designer luggage, just a slim leather folio tucked under one arm and a calm that unsettled anyone looking for weakness. She had boarded early, handed over her pass with a soft, "Thank you," and slid into 3 amperes without fanfare. To the cabin crew, she was just another passenger. And that was exactly how she wanted it. Amara had a ritual when she traveled. No flash, no noise, no cues to signal power. The navy suit she wore was understated, its cut sharp but not loud. The earrings small, almost invisible against the cabin light. Everything about her said professional, but not remarkable. The disguise of normalcy, the armor of invisibility. The man who now stood over her had seen that invisibility and mistaken it for permission. He looked down at her like she was already guilty. "Lady, you know you don't belong here. Seats like this? People like me." He tapped the headrest, staking ownership. Amara simply breathed, slow, measured, as if the air belonged to her too. She didn't argue. She didn't plead. She slid her boarding pass back across the tray table, the print crisp, the name bold. "Check it again," she said softly. The captain frowned but didn't touch it. The man scoffed, turning to the cabin. "This is what I'm talking about. Fake tickets, fake names. They think they can just walk in." But around them, the cabin wasn't fully buying it. A young man across the aisle, laptop half closed, watched with narrowed eyes. The woman recording kept her phone steady. Tension wasn't private anymore, it was collective. Amara's mind flickered backward. Dallas, 2001, her first big deal trip. She'd shown up in slacks and a blouse, nervous but hopeful, ticket in hand. The attendant back then had smiled, thin, then whispered, "Sweetheart, economy is down the aisle." It had taken her an hour and 3 supervisors to prove what her pass already declared. She had cried in the restroom afterward, not because of the seat, but because of the doubt in every stare. She remembered that day now, and felt no tears, only steel. The captain broke her reverie with a clipped tone. "Ma'am, if you don't comply, you'll be removed. This flight has priority passengers." He glanced at the white man still standing, as if the uniform alone decided whose priority mattered. Amara looked past him, through the cabin window. Clouds drifted, indifferent, steady. Her pulse stayed the same. Passengers stirred. A woman in row 5 whispered, "She showed her pass." Another man muttered, "This feels wrong." The voices were small, but they were cracks, and cracks spread. Amara folded her boarding pass back into the folio, voice calm. "I am in my seat." It wasn't volume. It wasn't anger. It was fact. And facts, in that cabin, were more dangerous than shout. The flight attendant stepped forward, a young man with slicked hair and a badge that gleamed too brightly for the role he was playing. His smile was tight, rehearsed, and already tired of her. "Ma'am, we'll need you to move. That seat's been reassigned. Please cooperate." Amara kept her eyes steady, her tone even. "It hasn't been reassigned. The ticket is valid." But the attendant didn't even look down. He tilted his head toward the standing passenger and smirked. "Sir, we'll get you seated. Just a moment." The implication was clear. One of them belonged, the other did not. A low murmur rose from the cabin. One passenger whispered, "She's got the boarding pass." Another answered, "Doesn't matter. They won't listen." The man in the polo folded his arms, chest puffed, the smirk spreading across his face like victory. "You see? Even staff know what's going on. Don't waste my time, lady. Get up." And the words stung the air like sparks. Amara inhaled slowly, the way she had in countless boardrooms where men had tried to speak over her, the way she had in a Charlotte hotel lobby years ago when a clerk had said, "This lounge isn't for your kind." The memory brushed her bones, but instead of softening her, it sharpened her edges. The attendant bent lower now, voice pitched just loud enough for nearby passengers to hear. "If you can't provide another form of ID, we'll have no choice but to escalate this." His eyes weren't asking, they were accusing. Amara laid her folio flat on the tray. Inside was not only the boarding pass, but 2 government-issued IDs and a platinum card embossed with her name. She didn't push them forward. She didn't need to. Her gaze alone said, "Enough proof already sits in front of you." But proof wasn't what they wanted. Permission was. And permission, in their eyes, was tied to skin, not paper. From 2 rows back, a middle-aged woman leaned into the aisle, phone raised. "I'm recording this. You're treating her like a criminal." The attendant glanced at her, face stiff, then turned back to Amara with feigned patience. "Ma'am, you're disrupting the cabin." That phrase, disrupting the cabin, landed like a stamp, heavy with institutional weight. It was code, the kind used to justify whatever came next. The captain shifted, jaw tight. He wasn't diffusing the tension. He was condoning it. "Security's on standby," he said, voice clipped. The man in the polo chuckled under his breath, leaning into the armrest as if warming up his victory seat. Amara's pulse didn't change. Her eyes moved once to the window. The sky outside was pale blue, endless, silent. Then she looked back at the captain and the attendant, voice calm as glass. "This is my seat." It wasn't defiance. It was declaration. And in that moment, the cabin felt less like a plane, more like a courtroom, every witness holding their breath, waiting for the verdict. The words circled around her like gnats. "Fake ticket, doesn't belong, move her out," each phrase sharper than the last. Yet Amara sat as if none of it pierced her skin. Her stillness wasn't weakness. It was weight, the kind that tilts a room without ever raising a voice. The attendant leaned closer, his breath edged with irritation. "Ma'am, last chance. Stand up, or we'll have to remove you." His words were formal, but his eyes betrayed the thrill of power, the kind too easily abused at 30,000 feet. Amara's reply was silence. Not passive, not fearful, deliberate. She let the pause stretch until even the passengers felt it. A silence so firm it made the attendant shift uncomfortably, as if he'd stepped into quicksand. The man in the polo tried to fill it. "See? She can't even answer. She knows she's caught." He laughed, sharp and ugly, and slapped the back of the seat in front of him for emphasis. The woman occupying that seat flinched. A baby 2 rows back began to cry. The cabin's calm had cracked, but Amara didn't move. She folded her hands neatly in her lap, fingers steady, eyes fixed on a point just above the captain's shoulder. The gesture was small, but in the charged air, it read like defiance carved in stone. Whispers grew. A man in business attire whispered to his companion, "Why isn't she saying anything?" Another answered, "Because she doesn't need to. Look at her." The captain's patience thinned. "Ma'am, we are not asking again." His tone echoed down the aisle, carrying with it the authority of the uniform and the fragility of someone whose authority was being tested in real time. Amara finally blinked, slow, measured. She lifted her folio, opened it again, and slid the boarding pass forward without a word. The small movement drew every eye. She wasn't pleading. She wasn't defending. She was presenting fact. And then she leaned back, hands still. The attendant stared at the document but didn't touch it. Instead, he straightened, voice louder now, speaking not to her but to the cabin. "This passenger refuses to comply with standard verification." His announcement wasn't policy. It was theater. Gasps scattered like sparks. A woman muttered, "That's not true." Another raised her phone higher. Still, Amara sat motionless. Her silence pressed harder than shouts. She thought of nights 2 decades earlier, poring over contracts that no one believed she had negotiated herself. Of boardrooms where she'd been the only black face at the table. Every nod she gave mistaken for permission to speak. She had learned then what she displayed now. That silence, when anchored in truth, could cut deeper than any roar. The man in the polo leaned in one more time, voice a hiss meant for her alone but heard by the rows nearby. "You're finished. They'll drag you out. Everyone can see you don't belong here." Amara tilted her head, eyes meeting his at last. She didn't say a word, but the look she gave him was colder than any sentence she could have spoken. And for the first time, his smirk faltered. The cabin wasn't quiet anymore. It was waiting. A red recording light blinked from row 4, small but unignorable, like a warning flare in the dark. The young woman holding the phone wasn't hiding it anymore. She angled the lens directly at the aisle where the captain and attendant stood. Her voice carried, soft but certain. "Everyone can see this. She showed her ticket. You're still calling her a fraud." The words stirred the cabin. A man in a gray hoodie leaned over to his seatmate, whispering but not low enough. "That's not right. She hasn't even raised her voice." His companion nodded, eyes fixed on the scene unfolding just feet away. The captain stiffened. "Turn that off. Recording is prohibited on this flight." His command rang hollow, too late. Several phones tilted upward, quietly, defiantly. The moment wasn't private anymore. It belonged to witnesses. Amara didn't look at the cameras. She didn't need to. She sat still, eyes forward, letting the silence do what it had done before, press harder than words. From across the aisle, a young man with wire-rimmed glasses shifted in his seat. He closed his laptop, then spoke loud enough for the rows around him to hear. "I saw her boarding pass. It scanned green. She's in the right seat." His statement wasn't dramatic, it was factual, unembellished, and that made it powerful. The attendant flushed, lips tightening. "Sir, please stay seated. This is a crew matter." But the momentum had shifted. A woman in row 5 spoke up, her voice shaking but determined. "Number. This isn't just a crew matter, you're humiliating her in front of everyone." She raised her phone higher, recording openly now. The man in the polo spun toward the witnesses, scoffing. "Are you serious? You're siding with her? She's faking it. You can tell." But the words no longer landed with the certainty they once carried. They scattered, met with narrowed eyes and disbelieving shakes of heads. Amara finally shifted not much, just a slow turn of her head toward the young man with glasses. Their eyes met, no smile, no nod. Just a quiet acknowledgement. "I see you, and that's enough." The cabin hummed with new energy, the kind that grows when silence cracks. Conversations flickered row to row. "Did you hear that? She's calm, not disruptive. Why are they still pressing her?" The captain's jaw tightened further, authority slipping like sand through his hands. "Enough. This plane won't move until she complies." But his words sounded less like control and more like desperation. The young woman with the phone didn't flinch. She looked straight into her camera and said clearly, "This is discrimination happening right now, on this flight." Her statement wasn't just for the cabin. It was for the world waiting on the other end of a signal. And the world had started watching. Amara's gaze didn't move. She remained still, a center of gravity in the chaos swirling around her. But inside, she felt the balance shifting. For the first time since the confrontation began, the room wasn't echoing only the voices against her. It was beginning to echo the voices for her. The trial by cabin had its first witnesses, and they were no longer silent. The curtain at the front of the cabin snapped open, and a senior flight supervisor strode in. Mid-40s, uniform pressed to perfection, posture stiff with authority. His nameplate read Pierce. He didn't glance at the passenger's recording. His eyes locked only on Amara. "What's the issue here?" His voice was brisk, clipped, as if the answer was already decided. The attendant pointed quickly. "She refuses to vacate the seat. Possible fraudulent ticket." Pierce's gaze sharpened, not at the boarding pass still lying on the tray, but at Amara herself. He spoke louder than necessary, making sure the rows around them could hear. "Ma'am, this section is for verified premium clients. You're obstructing pre-flight clearance. Unless you provide immediate proof, we cannot let this continue." Phones tilted higher. Whispers swelled. Amara lifted her folio once more, sliding out not just the boarding pass but also her ID. She placed both neatly on the tray. No theatrics, just evidence. But Pierce didn't look down. His lip curled. "We've seen this scam before. High-quality forgeries. It happens all the time, especially with appearances like this." The words hung in the air, heavy, venomous. A passenger gasped. Someone muttered, "Did he really just say that?" Amara didn't blink. Her stillness was deliberate, calculated, a mirror reflecting his prejudice back at him. The man in the polo grinned wider now, emboldened. "Told you, she doesn't belong here. Should have just gone straight to economy where she fits." Phones captured it all, the sneer, the contempt, the line that cut deeper than policy ever could. Pierce straightened, authority swelling in the vacuum. "Security will be notified. If you do not comply, you'll be escorted off and banned from future flights. That's final." The young woman recording whispered into her mic. "He hasn't even checked her ID. Not once." Her voice trembled, but it carried, and the rows around her murmured louder. Amara finally spoke, voice low but steady. "You've had proof in front of you for the past 10 minutes. What you want isn't verification, it's submission." The supervisor's jaw tightened. "Watch your tone." But it wasn't her tone that rattled him. It was her refusal to fold. A man in row 5 leaned forward. "She's calm. She's shown her ticket. Why won't you look at it?" His question wasn't to Amara, it was to the crew, to the authority unraveling in front of him. Pierce ignored him. He turned instead to the captain. "Do we proceed?" The captain nodded once, curt. "Call security." The attendant reached for the cabin phone. The man in the polo chuckled, settling into the aisle seat as though his victory was guaranteed. But the cabin didn't share his certainty anymore. Murmurs rose like static, words threading together. Unfair. Bias. Wrong. Amara sat still, her boarding pass and ID untouched on the tray. In the growing storm of accusations, one truth remained anchored in her posture. She wasn't moving, and the cabin knew it. The supervisor didn't wait for debate. He snatched the boarding pass off Amara's tray with a swift motion, the paper crumpling in his fist. For one suspended moment, the cabin went silent, every passenger watching his hand. Then rip. The sound was sharp, final, cruel. He tore the boarding pass clean in half and let the pieces fall onto the carpet like discarded trash. A collective gasp filled the aisle. Someone whispered, "Oh my God." Another voice hissed, "He can't do that." Phones tilted higher, recording every fragment fluttering to the floor. The man in the polo laughed, loud enough for the whole cabin. "Well, that settles it. Fake ticket destroyed. Back to economy, sweetheart." He nudged her carry-on with his foot, shoving it further down the aisle. The gesture was petty, but it stung like a slap. Amara's body didn't move. Her face stayed calm, her hands resting lightly against the armrests as though rooted. But her eyes followed the torn pieces as they drifted, memorizing the violation, engraving it deep. The supervisor loomed closer. "You've obstructed long enough. Step out of the seat or face a permanent ban from Horizon Airlines. You'll never fly with us again." The words hit the air like a gavel. Passengers shifted, unsettled. A man across the aisle muttered, "Permanent ban? For sitting in her seat?" Another woman shook her head. "This is insane." The attendant clutched the cabin phone, voice tense into the receiver, "Requesting immediate security. Passenger in 3 amperes is non-compliant. Possible fraud. His tone was rehearsed, practiced, dripping with the kind of certainty that assumes no one will question him. But people were questioning. The young woman recording spoke louder now, courage pushing through fear. She gave you proof. You tore it up. That's not fraud, that's abuse. The supervisor snapped his head toward her. Put the phone away, or you'll be removed as well. Gasps rippled again. Threatening witnesses was no longer control. It was collapse. The man in the polo leaned down toward Amara, voice dripping with disdain. Hear that? Nobody's on your side. Get up before they drag you out. But he was wrong. The cabin was no longer one-sided. Murmurs rose into open protest. Check her ID. She hasn't done anything. Stop this now. Amara inhaled once, steady. She turned her head slowly, finally meeting the man's eyes. No words, just a gaze so cold, so unflinching, that his grin wavered. The supervisor mistook her silence for surrender. He reached down, fingers brushing the handle of her carry-on. This bag is being confiscated until further notice. The contact shifted everything. Gasps turned to shouts. A passenger stood up, pointing. Don't touch her, another woman cried. She hasn't moved an inch. You're the ones escalating. Still, Amara's body remained anchored. Her voice, when it came, was soft but cutting. You've crossed into theft, and you'll answer for it. The cabin bristled. Authority thought it had landed its final blow. But in truth, it had just handed her the evidence she needed. The storm wasn't coming anymore. It was here. The torn boarding pass still lay in pieces on the carpet. The supervisor stood over them like a victor, chest rising with authority he no longer truly held. The attendant's voice droned into the cabin phone, summoning security. The man in the polo smirked, certain the moment belonged to him. But Amara finally moved. Not a frantic lunge, not a desperate defense, just one slow, deliberate motion. She reached into her folio and drew out her phone. The simple act drew the attention of every camera already filming. She dialed without hesitation. One ring. Then a crisp voice answered, Yes, Miss Lewis? The cabin stilled. The title hung in the air like a quiet thunder. Amara's voice was calm, level, every syllable sharp as glass. Activate protocol. The line on the other end carried no confusion, no delay. Understood. Initiating now. Passengers exchanged glances. The words were simple, but the weight behind them was undeniable. The woman who had sat in silence was suddenly commanding, her voice threading through the cabin with authority that needed no badge. The supervisor scoffed, arms crossed. Who exactly do you think you're calling? A lawyer? Good luck making your case when security escorts you off. His bravado rang hollow. But Amara didn't look at him. She kept her gaze forward, phone steady. Document everything from this moment. The torn boarding pass, the threats of a permanent ban, the confiscation attempt. Timestamp it all. Yes, ma'am, came the swift reply. The man in the polo sneered, louder now, desperate to reclaim ground. She's bluffing, calling her friend to sound important. Don't fall for it. But doubt flickered across his face, just enough for the cameras to catch. The young woman recording whispered into her mic. She said protocol, like she's done this before. The supervisor barked, Enough games. You're delaying departure for real passengers. Amara finally turned her head, eyes locking onto him. Her tone didn't rise, but it cut deeper than a shout. Number, you're delaying this flight with your prejudice, and now it's on record. Gasps rippled again. Someone murmured, She's not scared at all. Another added, She sounds like she's in charge. The captain shifted uneasily, for the first time glancing toward the cameras. He muttered, This needs to end. But the conviction in his voice faltered. On the phone, the crisp voice spoke again. Protocol confirmed. Live logging has begun. The board has been notified. Amara nodded once. The words weren't just for her. They were for the entire cabin. The supervisor blinked, thrown off by the mention. Board? What board? Amara leaned back in her seat, calm as ever. You'll find out soon enough. The murmur of passengers swelled into something larger, heavier, undeniable. What had started as whispers of doubt now sounded like the tide turning. And for the first time, it wasn't Amara on trial. It was them. The supervisor's laugh came sharp and brittle, like glass about to shatter. The board? Really? You expect us to believe you're speaking to what corporate headquarters, while sitting here in coach attire? He swept a hand toward her suit as if fabric alone proved fraud. But Amara didn't blink. Her phone was still raised, her voice still steady. "Patch me through," she said calmly. A beat later, the line crackled. Another voice entered the cabin, projected by her speaker. Polished, deliberate, impossible to mistake. "Miss Lewis, this is Chairwoman Douglas. We're receiving the live feed now. Do you want us to proceed?" Gasps tore through the cabin. Passengers looked at one another, phones trembling in their hands. Even the captain's composure slipped, his brow tightening. Amara nodded once. "Yes, confirm with them directly." The supervisor's face paled. "Wait, what is this? Who are you?" And then Amara stood. Not in defiance, not in flight. She stood the way a verdict rises in a courtroom, inevitable, unflinching. Her voice carried across the cabin. "I am Amara Lewis, majority shareholder of Horizon Airlines, and the only reason this plane is still on the ground is because my own staff decided that a black woman in this seat must be a fraud." The words landed like thunder. Passengers erupted gasps, mutters, exclamations overlapping. Phones zoomed closer. Someone whispered, "She owns part of this airline." Another answered, "She owns most of it." Ugh. The man in the polo stumbled back half a step, his smirk collapsing. That's not." He looked to the crew for rescue, but none came. The supervisor tried to recover, his voice high and strained. "This doesn't change the fact that—" But Amara cut him off with a calm that sliced sharper than rage. "It changes everything. Because the policies you've hidden behind, the authority you've misused, and the humiliation you've delivered, all of it falls under my watch." Her phone buzzed again. The polished voice returned. "Miss Lewis, the board is assembled. They've seen the footage. Standing orders await your direction." The cabin was no longer just a collection of passengers. It was an audience, riveted, recording, waiting. Amara turned slowly, her gaze sweeping over the crew, the captain, the supervisor, the man in the polo. "You thought silence was submission. You mistook patience for weakness. That mistake ends here." Phones caught every word. Passengers who had whispered before now spoke openly. "She's telling the truth. They're done for." Unbelievable they tried to kick her off her own airline. The captain's jaw tightened. The certainty in his stance eroded. He whispered to the supervisor, but the mics on half a dozen phones caught it. "We're in trouble." And they were. Because in 5 measured sentences, Amara had shifted the balance of the entire cabin. She was no longer a passenger fighting for a seat. She was the owner reclaiming her ground, and every witness knew it. For a full 3 seconds, the cabin was silent. Not the calm of order, but the silence of collapse, the kind that comes when a truth detonates and leaves no room for denial. The supervisor's face drained of color. His fingers, still hovering over the scraps of Amara's torn boarding pass, trembled. He tried to stand taller, but the weight of every camera lens aimed at him pulled his shoulders down. The captain, once rigid with command, now avoided her eyes altogether. His voice, when it came, cracked. This can't be." But passengers weren't waiting for him to finish. Applause broke out in row 6, scattered at first, then spreading like fire across dry brush. "That's right," a man shouted. A woman near the aisle lifted her phone high, voice ringing. "She owns this airline, and they tried to throw her off it." The man in the polo looked around wildly, his smirk long gone. Sweat beaded at his hairline. She's bluffing," he stammered. "This is some kind of setup." But no one echoed him. Phones caught his panic, and laughter rippled instead. In row 4, the young woman live streaming leaned closer to her mic, whispering through tears. "You're watching this live. Horizon staff tore up their own CEO's ticket. Share this. Everyone needs to see." Her feed's comments flooded in, hearts and angry emojis streaking across the screen. A passenger in row 2 muttered into his phone camera, "I've flown Horizon for years. Never again. This is finished." Another, standing near the galley, added, "They thought they could erase her. But you can't erase the owner." The supervisor opened his mouth again, desperate. "Please, Miss Lewis, if we could just—" Amara raised one hand, and he froze. She didn't need to speak. The gesture alone silenced him, the way a gavel silences a courtroom. The attendant with the slick hair glanced at his captain, then at Amara, his confidence dissolving. His voice was barely audible. "What do we do?" The captain's lips moved, but no sound came out. For the first time all flight, he had no command to give. Phones caught every detail. The quiver in Pierce's jaw, the pallor in the captain's face, the way the man in the polo slumped back into his seat like a deflated balloon. And still, the applause grew. Not everyone clapped, some just nodded. Some whispered, but the tide was clear. The cabin was no longer watching an unfair confrontation. It was witnessing a reckoning. One man shouted from the back, "Ground this flight! Fire them now!" Another yelled, "Justice right here in the air!" The live stream ticked past 100,000 viewers, then 200. The comment feed screamed, "Unreal! Powerful! I'm canceling my Horizon ticket tomorrow." Heaven to dip. The crew, once untouchable, now looked like defendants caught under 1,000 spotlights. Their authority hadn't just slipped, it had evaporated. Amara stood calm at the center, unshaken. Around her, panic and awe swirled, but her voice, when it finally returned, was measured. "Order will be restored, just not by you." And the cabin roared in approval. The applause ebbed into murmurs, then silence again, waiting for her next word. Amara didn't rush. She lowered her phone, tapped the screen once, and spoke with unshakable calm. "Carla," she said, her tone steady, "initiate immediate suspension. Pierce, the captain, and attendant on duty. Lock their system access now." The line crackled, crisp and obedient. "Confirmed, Miss Lewis. Executing suspension." A beat later, the supervisor's handheld device beeped. Its screen flashed red. "Access denied." He stared down in disbelief, fumbling as though the machine had betrayed him. The attendant's tablet chimed the same, followed by the captain's cockpit code pad blinking refusal. Gasps spread like wind through the cabin. Passengers leaned in, phones recording every glitch, every flash of red that marked the collapse of authority. The captain's voice, once commanding, now broke into fragments. This isn't protocol. You can't." But Amara cut him off with words that landed like iron. "I don't need protocol. I write it." Ugh. Phones caught the line instantly, a sentence destined to ripple across TikTok and news feeds before the wheels even touched tarmac. The supervisor reached once more for his badge, as if the plastic could shield him. It flickered, buzzing red against the reader. Locked out. Finished. He looked up, pale as chalk. Passengers erupted again, some clapping, some shouting yes, while others muttered in awe. "She really did it. They're done. This is history happening." The man in the polo shrank into his seat, tugging at his collar, avoiding the cameras now pointed directly at him. His bluster had evaporated, leaving only the sweat that rolled down his temple. Amara remained composed, not savoring victory, not gloating. Her eyes moved across the cabin, steady, deliberate. "This plane will not depart under the command of prejudice. Consider this flight grounded until further notice." The declaration rippled outward. Passengers gasped, then cheered. A woman near the rear raised her phone and shouted into her live stream. "She grounded the flight. The CEO herself just grounded the flight." Comments flooded in faster. "Iconic. Accountability in real time. Fire them all." The captain tried once more, his tone desperate now. "Miss Lewis, please. We can resolve this quietly." But Amara shook her head, voice calm as stone. Quiet is how injustice survives. Today, it ends loudly. Every camera caught it. Every witness felt it. The suspended crew stood frozen, badges dead in their hands, stripped of the authority they had wielded minutes earlier. Around them, passengers whispered, "Justice." And in the center of it all, Amara sat back down, folded her hands neatly, and let silence speak the loudest verdict of all. The courthouse doors loomed tall and heavy, but Alexandra Reed's steps were steady, deliberate, as if the marble itself rose to meet her. Behind her, the three disgraced officers lingered like shadows, stripped of shape badges blinking red, radios silenced, authority evaporated in the bright light of morning. The crowd parted as she moved, not out of fear, but reverence. Phones stayed high, capturing every second. In their lenses, Alexandra wasn't just a judge, she was justice embodied, walking past the ruins of arrogance. At the threshold, she paused. She turned back once, her gaze sweeping over the officers, over the stunned faces, over the scattered papers still trembling in the breeze. The silence that fell was not emptiness, it was gravity. Her voice carried across the steps, calm yet sharper than any gavel. You thought dignity could be slapped away. You thought justice could be torn in half. But justice doesn't live in your hands. It lives here. She pressed her palm against her chest, just above her heart. The gesture was simple, but it struck deeper than any outburst. The crowd erupted in applause, shouts of agreement tearing through the air. "That's right," someone cried. Another voice added, "This is history." Alexandra's eyes lingered on the officers one final time. "I don't need to raise my voice. I don't need to post a clip. I am the judgment you feared. I am the final record." It wasn't anger. It wasn't vengeance. It was verdict. With that, she turned and stepped through the doors. The heavy wood closed behind her, sealing the chaos outside. Inside, the courtroom awaited the bench, the seal, the place where her authority would be unquestioned. But in truth, the trial had already ended, and the verdict had been delivered on the steps for the world to see. The three officers stood stranded, drowning in their own disgrace. The crowd did not disperse. They stayed, still filming, still buzzing, ensuring that silence would never again erase what had happened. Alexandra Reed took her seat in the judge's chair minutes later, robed and resolute. The same woman who had been called trespasser, slapped, stripped of her briefcase, now sat as the highest authority in the room. The irony was complete, the justice undeniable. She adjusted the robe across her shoulders, eyes sweeping the courtroom with calm finality. And with a voice steady as stone, she spoke not to the lawyers, not to the gallery, but to the weight of history pressing on the moment. "You mistook silence for submission. That was your last mistake." The gavel struck, and for everyone who had witnessed the steps outside, the sound echoed not as the beginning of a hearing, but as the closing of an era. Before you go, tell me in the comments, what part of Alexandra's story hit you hardest, the slap, the silence, or the revelation? Your voice matters, because stories like these remind us that justice isn't abstract. It's lived, challenged, and defended. And as Alexandra Reed showed the world that day, true justice does not beg. It stands.